It's the 4th of September 2010. My name is Martin Paul. In this episode of the Information Podcast, you'll be hearing a recording I did last night of a public presentation by Brian Gerrish of the UK column. Brian is both a fantastic speaker and an extremely knowledgeable researcher, and in this presentation he spoke at length about the global agenda towards a fascist one-world government, the apparatus of control, and the very history of how we've got to where we are today. This was recorded last night, which was the 3rd of September, and the audio is clear for the most part. However, you will hear background noise, including the odd ringtone, passing motorbike, and some coughing. This was held in a packed out room above a pub in Brighton, and at least 50 people were present. So, bear with it. I highly recommend you stick it out. Gerrish raises a lot of topics and reveals some pretty staggering information. So, I'll now pass you over.
Okay, well, hello everybody. Anybody not know who I am? It's not been big-headed, you invited me here. My name's Brian Gerrish. I've got Mike Robinson with me. Mike has been with us now for a year and, just a bit over a year. He was watching what was happening in the country for a very long time. Decided at one point he was going to move down to some sunshine in the south of France, got down there, started to see what was happening back here, and eventually, to cut a long story very short, said to me on the phone, I'm going to move back because I want to get involved in the fight. And I said, you must be mad. And he said, no, we're going to do it. So he moved from a very nice location to the depths of Plymouth and has been with us for a year. He's done amazing things with all the websites. And is now starting to talk about money, which is where he was in the first place, up in the City of London, so I'll tell you a bit about that. We've also got Carol and Kate and Sheila, and they are the three ladies who've consistently supported everything we've done over what is about 5 years now. And I'll tell you, it's very interesting that we could not have done what we've done without their support and help. So they manned the office when we had our tiny little office. We had nothing in it. And Carol, who's disappeared somewhere at the moment, sat there and she said, bloody hell, I wish the phone would ring. Anyway, whatever it is, a few years later, she sits there and says with a cup of tea, I wish the bloody phone had stopped ringing. So something's happened, and we know we know we're going in the right direction. Can you tell me a bit about yourselves? Because you look a very interesting group of people. I've spotted the troublemakers. I'm joking about that. The guys at the back table. Do you all know each other? Some people come down from Wales tonight. So what's brought you here? Seeing an ad in the paper, or you can talk to me. I'm quite honest.
Well, me and my friend here, Ian, we're from Bedford.
Right.
50 miles.
Okay, so we've got a mix of people. We've got some local people from
Brighton.
But have you been interested in other people talking? Are you Ike people? Are you John Harris people?
Yeah.
Yeah? You all know John Harris?
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. Some don't. Okay. Well, basically, we can have a chat about speakers sort of at the end of the evening, if you like. But the thing I'm finding really interesting at the moment is all the different people talking about what's happening in society, talking about different parts of it. It all seems to be gently beginning to join up. And I can tell you that last night we were talking on Skype with some guys dotted around the country, and they were talking in depth about what's been done to the constitution of this country. They were talking a lot of detailed constitutional law, but showing that it was a scam. Not the original constitution or what's been done, and also talking about the fraudulent nature of the courts. There is no doubt that at the moment our courts, whether you go into a magistrate's court or a county court or the High Court, the whole thing is fraudulent. And so you've got, if you like, on one hand, people who are delving into the depths of the Constitution and detail of constitutional law and acts. And then if I go to the other end of the spectrum, you've got people like John Harris, who was coming up and saying that there's something going on in the background. These things aren't public bodies, they're companies. And the people and their information is slowly but surely coming together. So some bits we didn't quite get right initially, but now we're seeing that the picture's beginning to clear. I always look at the audience and say, I'd much rather tell you a few jokes and get you smiling and things, but the subject's a serious one, and we've got to talk about it, because if we talk about it to other people, it starts to spread. I was out in my back garden about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, sunny day. Next door was one neighbour, young guy and his wife and a couple of small kids moved in recently. I hadn't had a chance to talk to him, so I started talking. And he said, I saw something about you in the local paper, and that's because I had a go at standing in the election, not because I wanted to do it, but just to see what happened. So we talked, and the next minute he said, I'm really worried about what's happening. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, there's something going on in this country and I don't like it. But he said, I have to go to work and I have to earn a living. And he said, basically, what do I do? Do I fight or do I work and keep my head down? But I've got a young daughter and I'm really worried. And we talked on a bit, and then the next minute he said, well, actually, I read David Icke. How many of you have read any of David Icke's stuff? Yeah. I'm going to say exactly the same thing. It's very interesting that stuff that David Icke is writing and talking about is there agreeing with what other people are talking about. And we've got to get rid of the lizards bit. If you're coming from a Christian background, which is where I generally come from, and that could cause David some problems because he doesn't like religion, but I don't think religion and faith are the same things, but we're not going to go down there tonight. But we'd label this stuff demonology and say that basically what you're looking at is satanic. And it's very interesting because when I had a chat a little while ago with David Icke, and we were talking about mind control, and he said, well, it's very simple, Brian, whenever there's satanic stuff going on, there's mind control. Whenever there's mind control, it's satanic. So there's people who've got different ideas on different bits. I don't agree with all of it. Some people don't agree with bits of what I'm saying, but the pipeline is starting to fill up with the truth. And the truth is there's something really strange going on, and we need to tell people. When we talk, like my next door one neighbour, he goes away and talks to his friends, and it spreads. So the key bit is once you know what's going on and you say, what can I do as an individual, dead easy, talk to people. The disadvantage is that when you start talking to them, you're going to lose some of your friends. The best thing that could ever happen to you, because the friends that do the bomb burst are the ones who aren't real friends, and you will make new ones. But we laugh because we go in the pub, because we do have a laugh in between what we're doing, and we're talking about child abuse, we're talking about what's coming with the police state, we're talking about detention camps, we're talking about Satanism, we're talking about eugenics, which is coming into the pipeline, because they are now working towards the creation of the master race again. It's real, it's happening. So we sit there having a beer and a laugh and a joke about all this, and the people around us have not got a clue. So we have got to tell them what we know and just get the thing spreading. When everybody knows, or the critical mass, as some people say, when they know what's happening, we've won the battle, really, because the idiots carrying out and doing all the problems, there's only a few of them. How many? Maximum, in my opinion, in this country is probably a few hundred. And since we've got an adult voting population of about 40 million, I think the odds are quite good. So the trick is to actually see who these people are. Right, I've got a few slides. I've really had a problem putting things together, because every time I do this, I think, well, I've already talked about this. How do I get the message across? And how do I make it different so that people can actually say, well, okay, there's a new presentation, it's interesting, all the rest of it. And I get frustrated about this So I thought what I'd do is bring just a few books with me, because if you go out there, the problem is not where the evidence is, it's the fact there's so much evidence. This is an interesting little book on communism. Now, usually in an audience there are one or two people who are quite interested in political doctrine, and they'll start talking to me about the finer points of communism or the finer points of National Socialism. And yes, I do talk to BNP audiences because I believe it's very important that we get everybody on board and educated in the right direction. I'll say more about that if you want. But the key thing about communism is you've got to come back to Marx. And the moment you come back to Marx, you've got the baseline for what formed National Socialism and Fascism and communism. And I'm a simple guy, so I look at what both those regimes achieved, and it was death on a scale that we can't imagine because we are fat and comfortable and happy in this country. So if you're a Russian and you can go back and you know that Lenin and Stalin probably got rid of about 60 million people between them, we don't know what Mao Zedong did, we know what Pol Pot got up to, and we know Hitler got rid of a few million people. I just associate a doctrine of death with these people. So I don't want to argue about whether Marx was a good guy or not. I just simply say that I believe that people who used his doctrine ran into trouble. This is a very interesting book because it goes a step further. It talks about behind communism. And the interesting thing is, when you get behind communism and you get behind National Socialism, what do you find?
Bankers.
The bankers. Somebody bankrolled it. And the $20 million that created the start of the Bolshevik Revolution, bankers' money, and the 430,000 Deutschmarks that went in to start the Nazi Party, bankers' money. And then an irony starts, because if you look at the bankers, they call themselves Jewish. And then you have to say, are they really Jews or are they counterfeit? And I believe they're counterfeit. They call themselves Jews, but they are not Jews. And if any of you do read the Bible, it's quite interesting. There's a specific warning in Revelation, 2 paragraphs. It says, beware those who call themselves Jews and are not. So my statement is not anti-Semitic, it's actually pro-true Jewish people. Anyway, we can go in a different direction. This is quite an interesting book by Tex Mars. Any of you heard of him? Yeah. You can find him on the internet. And he's talking about big database projects where they're going to do database everything. And that is where they're headed. You buy a cup of coffee from Starbucks. I hope you don't, but if you do. And you drink it and you throw it out your car window. 4 months later you get a fine through the post because they can tell who went into the, I'm not saying this is Starbucks, this is where it's going to go. They can tell who walked into the coffee shop, who bought the cup of coffee, where it was made. It should have been disposed at a proper recycling plant. It was found on the highway. They can track it back to you. That's where they're heading. This one's in a different direction. It's talking about ponerology. I still have trouble with that, which is the study of evil. And it's written by a Polish guy, and what he's describing is how essentially a few people can contaminate a society. If we think about Germany, to say all Germans is bad, are bad, is really stupid. What we're looking at is a few people, and it was a team of about 12 that took over a country. 12 people. And if you go to the 12, it was a group of 6. So this man talks a lot of sense about what type of people can get into power, and if they get into power, what they can do. Has that anybody bought Tony Blair's book recently? Yes. People have been warning. This is an interesting book talking about what's been going on in Germany since the Second World War. It's talking about the re-emergence of the fascist groups. And of course in here one of the things they were talking about is the attacks on the guest workers. Now I can remember a few years ago we got the odd flash on the news about the torching of Turkish workers' accommodation, and there were families burnt, and then all of a sudden nothing in the BBC, nothing in the BBC. But books like this were warning, it's emerging. We can go to some older people here. There's a guy called Chesterton. Anybody ever read this stuff? It's a brilliant book, The New Unhappy Lords, describing what's happening in society and the fact that slowly but surely a world police state being established. And this man wrote, he toured, he gave talks, and he said, for goodness sake, wake up. And it's quite uncanny when you read this book because it was written back in the 50s. This one's good as well. A Scottish guy called James Gibbs Stewart. I don't know whether he's still alive now. I had the pleasure of meeting him. And he was doing the same thing. He was warning about a hidden hand that was driving society. It's a very good book. There's also another one he wrote called The Lemming Folk, which is about us. We're the lemmings. So if you go away from tonight thinking, well, I didn't believe everything Brian said, at least go and have a look for some of these books. Brilliant one here, Pawns in the Game, by a guy called William Carr. Interestingly enough, quite a few of the people writing about this stuff were in the Navy. That proves we're good guys. Okay, so this is another very good book where he goes through each of the things happening in the world, including this country. There's a lot going back historically. Of course, the Freemasons are covered as well. And then we can go in a different direction. Anybody read this one? It's Christine Keeler's book. Now, Christine Keeler was the prostitute that got involved in the Profumo affair. Basically, she was having relations with the Minister of Defence at the same time she was also servicing a senior Soviet naval officer from the attaché. Now, she was given a pretty hard time through the courts. And this book is absolutely fascinating because she will tell you what was really going on in this country, high society in the 1960s. And one of the things she talks about is going to the Astor estate, the Astor family estate. And she said, yes, she got involved in orgies, so that was going on there. But she said she would never get involved in the satanic stuff. So that was going on there. Okay? Now, the Profumo affair erupted with some photographs being delivered to the editor of the Daily Sketch newspaper. And the photographs were of an orgy, and they were unique photographs because they were taken on a Polaroid Instamatic camera. And at that time, there were only 3 of those cameras in the UK, and they were so new and so secret that they were held by the Ministry of Defence. So now we can say, there's connections in with the Ministry of Defence. But the main story is that Profumo took the rap because in the orgy were members of the royal family. That's what the circumstantial evidence says. But I recommend that book. I'm getting there. Bear with me. This is only the introduction. Now this one came out a while ago, and maybe Thatcher got her knickers in a really big twist because Peter Wright was an MI5 guy, and they messed him around and didn't give him a pension. He basically wrote a book to earn his pension. And they tried to ban it, and we ended up where it was banned in the UK, but on sale everywhere else in the world. Eventually they gave in. But what's interesting with this guy is when he was in MI5, he began to believe that there was massive penetration of the secret services. There were moles. Now, in his view, they were communist Soviet moles. Burgess and Blunt were part of it, but the key bit he said is the penetration happened in the 30s, and they got into the key universities, Cambridge and Oxford. That's where they recruited them. They were very keen on anybody with a dirty little secret, and in those days homosexuality was something that they could really latch on to, because you could lose your job, you could be imprisoned at one stage. So he started to look at these people and said, they were recruited, now they're moving through society and they're in positions of high power. But he was never allowed to do the job for the sweep clean. He did identify some of them, but interestingly enough, other people who analysed this book said he missed the main person, who was a guy called Victor Rothschild. The significance of Victor Rothschild was he was head of British intelligence during the Second World War. And Peter Wright actually thought he was quite a nice guy. I don't think he was a nice guy at all, because I think he was a banker doing what the bankers do, which is help stir up shit, basically. Excuse my French. Recommend this one. Anybody read this? Fascinating little book. You've seen the film? I haven't seen the film. The Men Who Stare at the Goats. And it's supposedly about people who were trying to see whether they could kill animals by staring at them. I reckon Tony Blair could do that. But when I read this, I got very, very interested, because what's being described in this book is a mixture of neuro-linguistic programming, and something a bit extra. Now we could go into channeling. Now some of you may consider that perfectly acceptable. I could debate it with you, but I'm not going to. But we're starting to mix tough, brutal, poorly trained American military people with how to mess around with people's brains. So when in this book they were talking about torturing Iraqis in containers, in metal containers, and they're laughing and giggling and thinking it's brilliant fun, this is unbelievably dangerous stuff, because you've got people loose who are not in their right state of mind. And I believe this is now happening with the British police, and I can prove that neuro-linguistics is being used in the training schools for the police. Okay? I'm going to hold it up, which I've never done before. It's one of Ike's books. Right? But pretty where it's due, because if you go into this, Ike has been warning about a lot of this stuff, and he's been doing it for a long time. He's been ridiculed, he's been undermined. Some of the stuff perhaps is on the fringe, but is he right on the basis of what he's saying? And I think he is. I think he absolutely is. This is a bit different. It's a good book. Dunblane Unburied. Anybody seen that one? It's an analysis by a lady, very brave lady, because she's been threatened and had a very hard time, because she says that the whole of the investigative process around the Dunblane massacre was total rubbish. It was a cover-up. And it was a cover-up to cover up paedophiles at the highest levels of the establishment. And that's why they put a 100 years block on any further reporting. So if you want to start to see where the dirt is in society, have a look at this one. Two more. This is an interesting one. It's a little book called Madeleine McCann by the Madeleine Foundation. Now, when I first came across this group, I was very wary, because Madeleine McCann is a very emotive subject. And I got a little white book from them, which has now been banned, although it was published and distributed. And recently, they produced this one, and they produced this because it contains verbatim documents that were recently released by Portuguese police. And what they are saying is the investigation was pulled. They do not blame anybody. What they're saying is the investigation into what happened to that little girl was deliberately pulled. Tony Blair got involved. Gordon Brown got involved. Sherry got involved, I think, at one stage. And a team of, I think it was 12 lawyers, was suddenly flown out on government instructions. Why? There's been lots of other children lost. Why in this case? So we're not pointing a finger at mum and dad in the book. I'll recommend you read it, because you may be amazed at what's in here. It's from the, I'll give it to you actually. This is a harrowing book, which I thoroughly recommend. It's called Pinned Down by a lady called Teresa Cooper. She was in a children's home when she was a young girl. Children's home was Kendall House. It was run by the Church of England. Well done, us Christians. And she was subjected to the most appalling abuse. She was drugged senseless for days, and while she was unconscious, she was raped and buggered repeatedly. When she survived that and got out, she collected evidence. She got statements from many of the other girls and a few of the other boys incarcerated. They got their medical records, which showed they'd been given unbelievable doses of drugs. And they had the real evidence of what had taken place. They confidently went to a police station, and from that time on, her life became a nightmare. And it's taken her until this year to get a compensation payout from the Church of England. And she has written those books to try and tell people what is really going on in the background with children in children's homes. I'm going to touch on a bit of that in the talk, but that book is phenomenal. You can get it on Amazon. And this one I'm focusing on a little bit, the European Union collective enemy of its member states, because it was written by a guy called Christopher Story. Has any of you heard of him? Well, he has been a phenomenal researcher into what's going on. He's done it on, I would say, on the edge of intelligence stuff in the States, in this country. He's produced tons and tons of paperwork and books. I'm going to say, died, unfortunately, earlier this year after suddenly becoming very unwell, only weeks before somebody had been with him and he seemed okay. But this book was the book that triggered me, that started to put things together. So I'm going to just talk a bit about that. First of all, I'm going to have a swig of this. Right. Sorry, just two little ones, actually. There's lots of little pamphlets going around if you know where to dig them out. And some of these were produced back in the 1960s and 70s, but people then were warning. So that was a brilliant little booklet produced with people trying to say that the European Union is not what you think it is. And then this one was quite interesting for me. It's not produced anymore, but it's called On Target, and it's an analysis of what's happening in the world. Now, there was a group of people behind this, but this little brochure was produced, amongst others, by an ex-army intelligence guy, and he was warning and warning and warning that what we were being told about the demise of the Soviet Union was rubbish, and it is absolute rubbish. So when we all gaily sat in front of our TV sets and the Berlin Wall came down and Germany reunited and that was the end of communism, absolute rubbish. Because in the hierarchy, in the political sphere, nothing changed. In fact, what they did in the Soviet Union is cleared out their old military material, modernised and redeployed. And if you want instant proof that what we've all been told is a pack of lies, go and look up any of the Glasnost journalists and reporters and TV people who came to the fore soon after the wall came down, because they're all dead. They are dead or missing. And the reason for that is it is a facade. All of the systems, the KGB, the camps, everything is still in place over there. And this man, and I'm going to come on to it in the talk, brought it all home, saying what you've seen is a show. I was still serving in the Navy. I was manipulating a certain amount of intelligence material when the wall came down. So I'm at work. I'm seeing a Soviet Union. I see what it does. I see what communism is about. I go home and the BP says the wall's coming down. That's it, communism's all over. And then I went back to work the next day and I thought something's not right. And of course, what was going on was a massive BBC propaganda exercise. Okay. I got interested in life a few years ago. Now, I know this is more recent, but it's a lady who specialises in directing porn films who was chosen to be a Liberal Democrat MP candidate for Gravesend. This is the sort of stuff that began to interest me. Now, he Clegg is on record as saying he thinks that this is just the sort of person that we need. Well, perhaps we might all say we have seen a bit of the product, but whether it's what we actually need when we're debating what should happen to the country and families, I don't know. But I'm not entirely convinced, but the electorate can think so because you can get elected. And then we're torturing people. This is the state of the country. I thought I joined up to help protect people and to protect the constitution of the country that didn't get involved in that sort of thing. And then I watch as we go into an unlawful war in Iraq, and I watch as civilians and other people are murdered on a pack of lies, and one of the people lying was Campbell, and yet when I saw the news the other night on Tony Blair's book, who did they ask about it? Alistair Campbell. So all of a sudden we start to see stuff that just doesn't add up. And of course some people, this happens to be an American guy, but he's proud to say, yeah, he thinks it's okay. Presumably he hasn't personally been waterboarded. Yeah? Who's gone to prison as a result of us, the British government, Secret Service people torturing and being involved in tortures? Has anybody gone to prison? Has anybody lost their job? So it's acceptable. So I've proved to you in no time at all that we now live in a country where it's okay to torture people. And if we go back to the G20 and the police hit somebody and knock them to the ground and they die, that's acceptable because nobody's gone to prison, nobody's lost their job. And I think I'm right in saying over the last 10 years, something like 1,100 people have died in police custody. No worries there then. This is serious stuff, and this is Britain. If we talk to people who've recently come out of Eastern Europe, Polish people or even Russians, and they listen to you and they do not want to believe you because they think they've come the other side of the line and this is a wonderful country. But I've got a Russian lady who has lived here for about 25 years and her little boy was taken away from her by social services. I'm not saying all social service people are bad. She has given me documents which are the analysis of court documents carried out by a company in Moscow, and they show the documents she was given in relation to her case are forgeries. The police won't get involved. She can't get anything through the court. She can't get anything through a local MP. So there's a Russian lady who's suddenly woken up to the fact that this country in a way is worse because at least when she was in Russia, you knew who the bad people were and you knew you had to stay away from them. Here, you could be sitting next to one. I don't mean that because you're all fine. Well, we've done this one, but really this is sick stuff. And the thought for me that you've got American, very, very gung-ho marine types playing around with how you get inside somebody's head and how you get into a bit of creative visualization. Anybody been involved in that? Creative visualization, picturing images in your head,
Yeah, it doesn't work very well.
Well, we're now doing it to young children in schools. And while most of the time it's fine, for people, 1 or 2%, you can get mental problems. And it's now being done on thousands of school children. So techniques they were talking about in this book are being done on school kids over here. Now if we go back pre-election, these were the people that we had, or some of them, governing us. And what is the key thing about these people? They've all got a Marxist communist background. Gordon Brown, If you read his biography, it says absolutely, openly and blatantly, was helped into power by the Scottish communists. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, but it would be nice if we'd known. And then we've got Banana Man, shortly to become leader of the Labour Party. And we've got this joker in the background, of course, who's great friends with all the Russian oligarchs and Rothschild, and he likes his caviar and small boys, apparently, allegedly, on boats. Another communist, Reed, communist. So we haven't got a Labour Party, we've got New Labour, and if you dig behind New Labour, it's Marxist. And there are many more of them. And I say they're not to be trusted, and they're not to be trusted because they've got an ideology which they want to impose on us. And we don't feature very highly. So they may wear smart suits, I'm glad I'm not in mine tonight, but what they actually want to do to us is not nice at all. And the worst thing is, they don't care. If you look at Blair grinning all over the television, he does not care a fig for any of the people who've died in the Middle East. And for him to say in his book that he shed tears, in my opinion, the man's an absolute liar.
Yeah.
Well, we've got to change. Haven't we? You couldn't make this up, could you? Because they clearly come out of the same laboratory. Now, I might have to mess around with the computer at the end because I'm going to tell you I was putting part of this together in the bus coming down here due to a conversation that was going on last night when I should have been doing this. But what do you think this guy looks like a cabbage patch? Doll. And so we run the, I don't know, if somebody could hold the paper up because there's a cabbage patch on the paper. Should we run on the back? Yeah, here we are, the cabbage patch column. Now we know that Mr. Cameron really hates this because it's amused a lot of his colleagues. We were told, because we do get people telling us things, we were told before the election that he had said when he got into power he was going to legislate against people like that, us, because we're what?
Terrorists.
We are domestic terrorists. Okay? Yeah, they believe it, because these people are mentally unbalanced, and that's what the Polish guy was talking about. They're narcissistic, they believe in themselves, they believe they're better than we are. They're richer, they've got better clothes, they go on better holidays, they're better educated, and we are the great unwashed. They believe it, and they don't have a conscience. So taking the mickey out of them is a good thing to do. And it's easy. I found this on Google, and I'm going to resist it. Right, I'll just bring it in there somewhere. I can't remember the name of the film, but it's about the two cowboys. Throwback, yeah. Sorry, whoever did the job on that did a very good job. I didn't expect to have the band bodies through they're all hiding in the woodwork, which is accurate. So this is Alan Milburn. What's special about him?
Nothing.
His face. Well, apart from nothing. He was Labour. Now all of a sudden he's become an advisor to the Conservative coalition government.
Couldn't make it out.
And this is his task, if you could read it. He's advising on breaking down the closed shop mentality of the professional classes. You're all prejudiced. You are, you're full of prejudices. And your views are not his views. They're not Cameron's views. They're not Clayton's views. Because they're your own views, my own views. So they're going to change us. They're going to do it. And how they're going to do it? You want to change a country, you want to change people, get into the schools. If you have got young children and you haven't actually got into your school to see what they're being given for work, what they're reading, what they're being taught, you should do it. You might be amazed. These people are into the schools with vengeance, and they're going to change our mentality. And they know that we don't like that. So, we're moving on. So we've come through to the people who are now at the top of the competition to become leader of the Labour Party. We've got both the Miliband boys over here. And we know they're a Marxist. How do we know they're Marxists? We haven't got to listen to them talk, but their father, Ed, was one of the joint editors of a dictionary of Marxist thought. And he's the grandfather or the father, I can't remember which one's gone, but he's buried in Highgate Cemetery, fairly near Karl Marx. Well, you don't do that if you're low down the pecking order. And he was an illegal immigrant, it's true. Okay, so these two, big problem. We've got Monkey Man versus the more shadowy American style guy. So that's interesting. We've got Andy Burnham. He comes across supposedly as the clean family man, but he's never done anything, and he's involved in culture. Culture is part of the Marxist terminology for their thing. I'll come on to that a bit more. Ed Balls, what's special about him?
Haircut.
He's a Bilderberger. He is a Bilderberger. I didn't get time to get the letter across, but I can find it. I've shown it in previous talks. He attends Bilderberg meetings, and of course the Bilderbergers were set up under the chairmanship of Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, who was an SS officer and a Nazi. It's not difficult, it's all there when you go looking for it. He went to the Bilderberg meeting, he charged all his travel to the public purse. We've got the documents which show that. He's not allowed to do that. He shouldn't have done it anyway, because the Bilderbergs say that people are not there in a public capacity, professional capacity, they're there as individuals. So he spent, whatever it was, £5,000 on travel. We paid for it, well done, us. And then he says, well, I don't give a shit, basically. So nothing's happened to Mr. Ball, so he's a dangerous guy. And this lady, well, I'm making my mind up on her, because Hackney has traditionally been one of the most rotten boroughs in the country. And I'm going to say this, I think she's the token. It's really cruel stuff. I think she's the token. I think Obama's the token. I think Miliband's going to get it. Miliband's, I think, been on one of the courses as well. But, yeah, okay. So we wait and see. But if this lady wins it, she's been put up front to be the token person. And these guys are going to drive it. And I'm not being rude to anybody, I'm just giving it as we see it. Yeah? Now, I'm coming back to this book. It's really hard reading. And once you've read the book, you've got to go through all the notes, which are in tiny font. But this guy is talking about, basically, there being no difference between the Soviet communist regime to take over Europe and the Nazi German one. And if you want a link between them, he goes through documents, he goes through statements that were made, where there is a common plan to dominate Europe. Who trained the Panzers and the Luftwaffe? The Russians did. German army training, because the limitation on the Versailles Treaty and the Luftwaffe was all carried out in Russia. And there's another brilliant book about a guy called Martin Bormann, who was in with the top people. And according to a French guy who's written a very detailed book, he was a French intelligence just after the war. He says that Bormann was a Soviet agent through the whole of the war. So there's very mucky stuff going on in the background. And basically, Christopher Story started to bring it to the fore. Just keep on time. Now what he put in the front, which is what triggered me, it's a little matrix. We can give you copies of this. But down this side, it had areas of society like family, education. It was talking about justice, security, race relations. And in the middle it said what was going to be done to mess it up. And here was going to be the result. And I can tell you, if you went to family, it was foster the breakdown of families. That was the political objective. And why would you do that is because if you destroy the family, apart from the chaos that causes, the children are left for the state to claim. So this was being written as a political military doctrine for how you took over a fat, dumb, happy, complacent Western country. That's us. That's the Americans. Okay? But I'm not forgetting who created this mess in the first place, which the gentleman over there has given us the blankets. Now, this is a 25-year plan, and it was designed to demoralise initially. So an orderly, calm, quiet, generally well-behaved society was going to be made steadily more turbulent, unsettled, chaotic. They use a term. They wanted to create poisonous party politics. Does that fit? They wanted children to be out of control on drink, drugs, sex. They've achieved it.
Yeah.
Right? Now, where does the doctrine come from? Well, we know that because we can research. And I've put something here. And I promise you I'll get some copies of this. These are papers. This one was written in 1942 by a guy called Colonel Rawlings Rees, who was a psychiatrist. And he was saying that when we have won the war, when the Allies have won the war, we need to get in amongst people to implement mental hygiene. What does he mean by that? Well, according to these guys, we are not mentally healthy because our beliefs have been skewed by what our parents told us. So what his people were going to do is cleanse us mentally. And if we didn't want to be cleansed, we were going to be eradicated. And this guy ended up in the United Nations. These are papers on psychiatry from the same period, and they're talking exactly the same language. Now this is all based on the Frankfurt School, which is where Lenin got psychiatrists to start thinking how they could use their skills to conquer a nation by attacking people's brains. It's real stuff. The bombs and the bullets are all there, but I can tell you, even Navy warfare books, you flick through, it gets into psychological warfare. We were only given a tip of what was really going on. Do I believe this is just the communists? No. This is to do with somebody behind them. After the demoralisation, you destabilise. Trouble on the streets. Anybody here belong to the English Defence League? I'm very interested in English Defence League because I don't know much about them.
We met them on Monday. They came to town on Monday. We met a few of them.
Right. I've spoken to one guy on the phone. Just as with the BNP, I want to go and talk to them because they need to understand at the moment they're being duped.
Yeah. They were all waving Israeli flags, which I found really strange.
Well, I don't find that too strange.
Well, no, it's not strange.
So basically, violence is now to be stirred up on the streets. And 40% cuts to the public sector is going to produce massive unemployment from the public sector. At the moment, 6 people are searching for every 1 job. When those cuts come into force, you're talking 10 people to 1 job. And there's dirty stuff going on in the background because more people are being encouraged in. We're not anti-immigrants here because if we talk to people locally in Plymouth, they're really worried too. If you talk to the Muslims up in the Midlands, they say this is crazy. Our people, who've been here, some of them now for 50 years, can't get jobs. We're talking common sense, we're talking about human beings. But more and more people coming in while the system breaks down. They want violence on the streets. That's the destabilisation. And this is an interesting word, normalisation, because we think that means bringing society to normality, but to the Marxist military mind it doesn't. It means making us good communists. Can I mess around with terminology? I'm not talking communism. I'm talking Gramscian fascism. Because the form of Marx they're using is to bring the public and the corporate sector together. And Gramsci, who was an Italian student of Marx, but believed in fascism, said that if you slowly merge the public and private sectors, you can create the state control without the public noticing. And that's what they're doing, and that's why they're going hell for leather to take over the NHS at the moment. It's a scam, and it's being done by both sides. So this was the thing that woke me up, and if you went through it, which I'm going to do a little bit in a minute, you can see what's going on. Now, I'm going to have to do this for memory, but at the beginning, they said they're going to attack Christianity. Now, you can be as scathing about Christianity as you like, but if you come to the raw bit of it, what is the greatest rule? What's the greatest rule?
Don't harm anyone.
Love one another.
Yeah.
Above all else, love one another. Dead easy.
No.
I couldn't forget that. These guys don't want Christianity around. I'm not going to debate why, but they want it out with a vengeance. Now, I'm showing the Angel of the North because, in my opinion, the Angel of the North is a cult, and it's there for a reason. It's oppressive. This was the mosque being set up close to Sandhurst. I'm not squeamish. I talk to guys in the Muslim community all the time. They're seeing what I see, and that's basically Christians and Muslims gradually being wrapped up against each other. So there's a hidden hand telling the Christians it's the Muslims, and for Islam it's us, but it isn't us, and we say it's the bankers. But all this is being stirred up and is mentioned in the plan. This is the state of young people, education, dropped on the street. A few years ago, I witnessed for the first time the spectacle of a woman urinating in the street. It was not nice. And I thought, what on earth is going on here? She was drunk out of her brains. That's the level we've got to. And it's been done deliberately. Here's the other half, the media. And Mike did a brilliant video, well, it was, it was looking at a video that had been done on this woman. If you go and see some of her videos, death, sadistic stuff, sadomasochism, drugs, Satanism, and it's all being pumped out as being good for the kids. Here she is with the horns on. This is artwork, and this thing here says that somewhere in here it will say, produce meaningless, ugly art. Right? That is known, this is Wote Street in Basingstoke, if I remember the street's right, I'm sure it's Basingstoke, and the local children call it the Wicked Willie, so they know. Okay, we're laughing at it, but this is not there for titillation and humour. This artwork is there because on your subconscious it drags you down. And if you keep your eyes open, and I guarantee it's here in Brighton like anywhere else, you will suddenly see artwork and you think, where did that come from? It's ugly, it doesn't mean anything, and it's designed to do that because it screws with your mind.
Do you know what we've got a lot of pictures of people writing the artwork?
Yeah, anything that's aggressive. Yeah. Anything that's aggressive is good. Yeah, because what they're doing is changing the psyche of us as a nation so that angst is there. Yeah? It's a terrible thing, but for me, because I was there with the military textbooks, I'm thinking, hey, this makes sense. But what I know now is the enemy isn't Russia or the Germans, it's the people driving the regimes. And we're getting into a different area there. So I'll just go through. Justice was to be made inconsistent. Victimise the victim is what it says in the policy. And you've read that in the papers. Where somebody does something which is right, they stop the robber, and who gets taken away by the police and fined? The person who carried out the right action. And that is turning common sense on its head, because when you do that, you start to screw with people's minds. It's all documented here. This is a bit more on society, because I don't know whether you've noticed, but paedophilia is on the rise. And we are getting some incredible stuff coming into the paper. We've been trying to help a girl called Holly Gregg, a Down syndrome girl who was abused. And she cannot get justice and her mother can't get justice, but boy, have the courts turned against the people trying to speak out. I've got an injunction on this, so it's Mike, so we can't tell you any more, but what I can tell you is it's interesting to watch the police, the judiciary, the media in general, and public authorities and social services all turn against a mother who has tried to tell the truth about what happened to her daughter. Down syndrome girl repeatedly raped by members of society, including judges, sheriffs. Can't say any more. Now, who's in this picture? Well, this is Cabbage Patch Man. And this is a Heseltine lurking on the left, but this is the guy who's interested in. His name's Matthew Byrne. Now, he was a big wheel up in Liverpool, turned out to be a very nasty paedophile, and he also just about murdered, he just about murdered 3 prostitutes because he used to get his kick out of strangling them. He was also a common purpose advisory board member. How many of you have heard about common purpose? Right, okay, well, the advisory boards choose the people who are going to go through the training. And he was on the course, and here he is with dear old Mr. Cameron. Well, I'm not suggesting Mr. Cameron knew what he did, in any way, shape or form. This is another common purpose paedophile, James Rennie. Linking common purpose with nasty things. They kept threatening to take me to court, but they're not so keen since the paedophiles that I said were there 4 years ago have started popping up. That's one off the edge. Have we got any more? Yeah, this is nasty stuff. This is a young couple who social services said she's 5 months pregnant, but the local social services said this girl couldn't get married because she was not intelligent enough. Now, a few smiles, but this is straight out of Nazi Germany. Because the next step, when you're not intelligent enough to get married and look after children, is they might as well murder you. This is happening, and we are hearing phenomenal stuff about what's being done to children. Some social service people get really angry with us because they say, that's not me, that's not my friend. What we say to them is we know that, but within social services, like within the police, within the political scene, we are looking for a particular group of people. This one's a laugh because part of this plan is to destabilise the military of the Western countries, and boy, we're being destabilised. So there are brave young guys and women overseas dying for a war which is about protecting opium for the bankers. Meanwhile, they dismantled the armed forces, and our aircraft carrier is going to be joint manned with the French, which is nothing about a partnership. It's because they know it will degrade performance. And we did an article on this about, whatever it was, 2 years ago, and all of a sudden that's now in the press. Now, here's an interesting guy. Does anybody know who this is? Hiding behind the woodwork?
But his name was there.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't see that myself, so one or two of you are waiting. Now, he's an interesting guy because he was chairman of the Tory party up until a while ago. And we noticed that he had his website connected to gay porn. So we did a little article on it a few years ago. But he's been in the background, and he was the man that thought that the 1922 committee should be tracked down. The old true blue Tories that were getting a bit worried about Cameron, because Cameron is new con, new Labour, new con, same con represented. Okay? So this man's in the background, but why should we be interested with him? Well, this is my friend, my special friend, so you recognise her. This is Julia Middleton, and a guy spotted her in the middle of Devizes and thought to himself, my goodness, this is the chief executive of Common Purpose, the international leadership organisation. And so he took a photograph of her, and she wasn't very amused. If I blew the photograph up, she would get a bit fatter, but the important thing is, in her jumper are lots of holes. And I feel sorry for her because her shopping bag is empty, and she's got holes in her jumper, but she earns about 90 grand a year, and the bulk of that money comes straight out of our pocket. So we've seen Francis Moore, and then we've got Julia Middleton. Well, we know a bit more about Julia Middleton because this is her book, and these are some of the things she talks about in the book. She says that we should use idiots, an expert idiot. She means intelligent people like university professors. They think they're very clever academically, they're naive, they're idiots. We should use them. We should use fifth columnists. Well, the moment you talk about wanting to use a fifth column, you're talking about deceit. Getting in to break things down from the inside. She likes the banks, and in this book she says Deutsche Bank is wonderful. Well, she wouldn't, because they give her millions of pounds. Until 1992, the chairman of Deutsche Bank was a guy called Alps. And he's very interesting because he's in charge of Deutsche Bank's component of Farben Auschwitz. But he was never prosecuted. He went on through the system to become president. And then they started to fund Common Purpose. And Lehman Brothers, she said, were brilliant. And in other documents, Common Purpose has recommended the leadership of Lehman Brothers to school children. Well, I thought they went bust. But no, she thinks it's all brilliant. And this is us. She calls us black holes, people that hold back the movement. And we should be crushed, basically. Go around them, discredit them. She's tried pretty hard to discredit me, but it hasn't stuck at the moment because I only deal in evidence, and she knows it. So she doesn't like me, but she doesn't come near me at the moment, and I'm very glad about that. Okay, so we know what Julia Middleton's about. Now, this is interesting, because this is a very recent email on the 18th of May from Common Purpose on behalf of Julia Middleton to Francis Ward. And she says, dear Francis, I think we and quite a few Common Purpose alumni, that's their graduates from the civil service, could help with the culture change you need to bring about. Could I come and see you? And she wants to bring David Bell. Well, he's in the media in a very, very, very big way. But be careful because there are two David Bells. So here's Julia Middleton, who is what I would call a New Labour lovey. She was in and out of Prescott's office. She's a socialist. She's worked for Demos, demon, Marxism. She's been there. She is it. And yet the Tories are in power, and who's she talking to? And we are waiting to get the rest of this because we'd like to know who they're going to achieve the culture change. But I think Francis Ward wants the culture change inside the Tory party because he's having trouble with the old-fashioned Tories who smell a rat. So I just wanted to show you that this woman is doing stuff. And this was quite an old email we got hold of where a lady called Reingeval, who's involved with Common Purpose, says that it's very important that they're going to get Leeds Common Purpose twinned with Lille in France. And in another document she says, our networks will soon be very important. What networks is she talking about? She's talking about the networks of the new state. So you can dig this stuff out. I've got so much I don't know what to do with it. We will do an update of the website shortly. But if you know what to look for, it's so easy. Somebody gave me these, they're a little brochure. I hope I've got it here because I want to read them. Actually, I've probably got something. Well, you're going to have to trust me, I'll find it in a minute. This is being given to public authorities, and it will talk about all sorts of things: health, finance, how to deal with people. It's all funded through the Solstice stuff and an organisation which was called IDEA, which is really closely to Common Purpose. But if you go into the document, the language is phenomenal, because it talks about we changing things, changing people's behaviour, changing their eating habits, making them healthy, making them wealthy, bringing together people in partnerships. So these people are sat there deciding how they're going to change society, and they're publishing it in books like this. And this is why when you deal with your local council now, your local councillors will tell you that they are being pushed to one side. The elected councillors are having power stripped from them, and the officers who are paid huge sums, 260,000 I think is the highest paid chief executive in a council, they are the ones calling the shots. They are the ones being given political training. So this lot's coming in the background. Right. Are we talking on a world scale? Well, this was in the Times or the Telegraph, and they did it for me. This was Obama. They shared your stories for politics of Common Purpose, and here's got Gordon Brown, Common Purpose. That's because Common Purpose is the international movement to form the New World Order. And if you want to say what it is a dictatorship. But it's very dangerous. Right, I've done this before. This is the society we think we're in. These people are the ones governing us. We're at the bottom of the pile, of course. But what's really there are organisations who want to change us. I keep coming back to Demos because it is one of the key ones. But there's all this lot. Roundtree Foundation, Young Foundation. You can see them very easily in Google. Where do they get their money? Banks. They say they go around collecting money, but actually it's from banks. So what you've got are organisations forming policy, and they then stick it into the third sector. Blair was always on about the new society, the third sector, and he's really talking about a cuckoo which was pushing all this lot to one side. Right, now, in comes the policy, and they then shove it into Parliament. MPs don't do any thinking, they do what they're told. And when they've done all the stuff, it all drops on us. Now imagine over the top of this cuckoo, you start messing with people's minds. You train them and they think they are leaders. And that's what Common Purpose does. And these are very dangerous people. They believe they are superior. So Common Purpose comes in across the top. Now that was the situation before the election. Now what's happened is that. In comes Cameron, I'm Tory, I'm different, we need change. Well, he's a lying bastard, because nothing's changed. All he's done is renamed the third sector the big society. And if you look at what he says it's about bringing power into charities and the public sector. The voter has no rights over those people. So this is the scam. Can we take it on to a world level? Yes. This is an old fact now, but it's the all-party parliamentary group for world governance. So I'd say to you, nothing can be more spooky than looking at idiots like Miliband, Cameron, Clegg, Blair, Brown. We were told, I don't know whether it's true, allegedly he left Parliament, this is Mr. Brown, and disappeared into a psychiatric unit for a few days. We were told that, so it's hearsay. It's interesting if it's true. But those people are working within Parliament on world government. And the United Nations is the vehicle for that. And if you look in detail at the United Nations, you'll find something very funny. And that is, simple clue, they use a publisher called the Lucis Trust. And the Lucis Trust was originally the Lucifer Publishing Company. They have a temple, well, I'll call it a temple inside the UN. It has an altar. I can tell you it's not Christian. If you follow through where all the policy is coming about leadership training, it's in UN documentation. And one of our best researchers at the moment, who's been digging into this stuff now for 5 years, says it's easy now. Any new policy that comes through government, I can track back coming through the UN. Leadership training, the increase of the third sector, the rise of non-government institutions, what's happening with pharmaceuticals and drugs, all this policy coming straight through the UN. Now the reason I couldn't finish my presentation was last night we ended up in a discussion over Skype with some guys who've been looking at constitutional stuff for 15 years, and they've got it. They can show from roughly 1890 onwards, where key acts were brought in which slowly took power away from us and concentrated it within Parliament. And they are going to be able to demonstrate beyond any reasonable doubt that what John Harris has been saying about the courts being fraudulent commercial organisations is absolutely correct. Now at the moment, the judiciary are supposed to protect us by keeping an eye on what the politicians are doing. So if we've now got corrupt judiciary and judges working within corrupt courts, we're getting in a very dangerous position. Very, very dangerous. Particularly when it's easy to show that many of the top judges and law lords are not only perverted, just go and have a look on paedophilia and judges on Google, but they're in with the bankers and the big money. That situation is the situation that was fermented in the Bolshevik Russian state. The situation in East Germany. China I can't comment on, but certainly in European terms, we've seen countries destroyed by this technique before, and it's absolutely real. So tonight I'm going to end on that, but I'm going to say, I think from now on we are going to see a rapid coming together of ideas. Some things, some of us didn't quite get right. I initially focused on the EU, because I thought the EU was the driving force. It isn't. If you say to me, where's the seat of the problem? It's the City of London. The EU is a creation of the City of London. The UN is a creation of the City of London. And we are looking for a group of people who are amongst the bankers. Not all bankers are bad. They're amongst the bankers. They are amongst some of the richest people in the world. And we're ultimately dealing with Satanists. And what do they get up to? They murder children. And I have been stunned, and I know Mike's been stunned since he's joined us and been in the office when we get calls from parents saying what's gone on with their children. when you get a mother call you to say her disabled Down syndrome son of 30 years is brought home from where a home that he would go to give them respite, missing 2 fingernails and a toenail. When they follow it through, the police officer sits on the couch in their home and says very quietly, "I feel so sorry for you because I know your son has been tortured, but I can't do anything about it." So if we come back to this, Dunblane, just one example of people in the state organisation doing absolutely despicable things. They don't have a conscience, they don't care. Can we do anything about it? What did I tell you at the start? Talk to people. Choose your subject. Do you know this? Do you know that? If they don't listen to you, don't worry about it. Let them walk away. If you keep doing it, you do it in a loud voice when you're queuing in the post office or you're in the Tesco queue. You get to the cashier you get to the cashier faster because they'll be excellent subject. But somebody will then follow you outside and say, "I couldn't believe what you're saying because my wife's been telling me about this stuff and I didn't believe her." All we need to do is get 2 extra people a day. I know if you talk to Ike, you talk to Ian Crane, I haven't spoken to John Harris for a while. If you talk to the other people speaking, something has changed over the last 6 months. People are waking up, but we've got to really get people moving. Who's going to sort it out? Who's going to sort the police out? The police are going to do it. Because we've now got people in the police saying, we know something's wrong, we now know what it is, we're trying to see how we can deal with it. It's happening in the armed forces, it's happening in the NHS, it's happening with MPs, most of them are too shit scared though to do anything. Okay? So the moment the truth is out there, that we are being attacked, it's real. If you're not bothered about yourself, they're going to have the children. They want the children. But if we talk and spread the word, we can actually do something really good.
They don't like being exposed, do
they? They don't like being exposed. They're really frightened of it.
Right, we've come down from Portsmouth.
That doesn't make you bad people.
No, it's a lot down. But we talk all the time. Trying to shake people awake is been like 12 months.
Yeah.
There's next to 2 of us still.
I can tell you, when we get emails in, I mean, probably for me, one of the best ones, I got an email from a lady in Israel. And she said, we're seeing this mind control here in Israel. We're seeing them take the children. We're seeing them do this. Blimey, where did you get hold of us? Internet, websites. It's spreading.
We're trying to lead by example. We bought a couple of trucks and we've been laying claims and trying to poke the police into come and take the trucks or something, just so we can give an example to people.
Right,
because at the moment we talk to a blue in the face.
Yeah.
Well, you never know what.
You don't get anywhere. Whereas if you've got an unregistered truck, for example, it appeals to people not paying for something.
Yeah, okay. We all experience this frustration, you know, and I say sometimes, you know, what are you going to do? But if you ask me at the moment, is something happening, I say to you, absolutely. And I wouldn't lie to you. I would if I had a suit on, but I've got a suit on. I utterly believe something has turned, and it happened a few months ago, and it was quite uncanny because people started to say, I think something's changed. It's spreading, and it's exponential. It's going to be like a fire. So we just got to get that fire started. Yeah. But the thing that works is to tell the truth and use the words. And I always come back on this. And I did it in the first talk I did. If you say to me, what do these people want to do? They want to murder us. They are already talking eugenics. If you hear the BBC kind of wind up now, I listened to a Radio 4 show where they were debating benefit cheats. out there are millions of benefit cheats and we're phoning in saying, yeah, they're scum. What's that all about? That's about angst. And what the Nazis did very successfully is they made people non-people. If you drive around, I'm not a smoker, but you see the smokers huddled in the doorways, they are the start of the non-people.
That's me.
So it's getting, use the words, and people will do a bomb burst. Yeah, but all you need, if we have a meeting, I don't know what's going to happen tonight, probably there's going to be a bomb burst and everybody goes, but if you have a meeting and you know that you've got an audience where there's quite a lot of people who've never heard any of this stuff, and 4 or 5 of them stay, brilliant. Because those 4 or 5 are capable of starting the little cells on their own. And this is something else that's happening, is the barriers are breaking down now between groups. So if I go back 3 years ago, in the family situation, the mother's support groups hated the father's support groups. They really hated each other. Yeah? And that was being fed, stoked up by the government as well. And now you say, look, you've both been conned because the breakup of the family is to hurt both the mum and the dad. The 9/11 truth people, I think I'm allowed to say this, I did a talk in Bristol, and when I came to say any questions, there were no questions. So I said, why did you come? Well, the thing is, we're only really interested in 9/11. And I said, well, I'm interested in 9/11, but you haven't paid attention. Because if you haven't paid attention to what I'm talking about, you're never going to find the truth about 9/11 because you're going to be dead. 3 days later, I get told there's been a split. It was brewing anyway. But 9/11, if anybody's 9/11 truth movement here, you can tell whether it's true or not. But I was told that there was a split developing between 9/11 truth people who believed in global warming and 9/11 truthers who didn't. Okay? 3 days after I did the talk, I get a phone call saying there's a large part of the 9/11 truth people want to know more. And now we interface with them, we interface with Ian Crane, we interface with John Harris, Albert Burgess. Sometimes we have fights, because we're all rebels. But overall, all these groups are beginning to work together. And the art is not to put them in an organisation. Because if you put them in an organisation with a committee and minutes and all of this rubbish, the moles come in and then they destroy it. So you keep it loose, you just work with your own little group. Anybody new comes along, do you like them? They come in, you don't like them, they don't come in. If I ever ring you up and say, can I have a list of all your contacts? You tell me to bugger off. Because I don't need it. Nobody should need your contacts, they're your contacts. If you keep it in little loose cells, you can't penetrate it, you can't break it down.
And we've had a few trials.
We've had a few bombs down our ends as well, so we didn't go. So it's beginning to go, but you want to get out there, research stuff. If you haven't believed anything I've told you, get out there and research it for yourself, but tell other people, and you'll be amazed. You'll make some great friends. Okay, I'm going to end there. I'm happy to answer any questions. I can do a bit now. I think Mike wants to have a chat. Shall I do questions? Okay. I've got one, so I'm feeling happy now.
What's
Yeah.
the kind of thing you're interested
Well, we were talking. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Stephen Hawking came out and he said that God did not create the universe, and that the universe could have happened spontaneously because of the laws of physics. But this seems to me to be as irrational an argument as the person who, and I don't want to offend anybody who is absolutely Christian here, by the way, because I'm not, but the person who believes that God created everything, one act after another, there are laws in the universe which are fundamental. They can be discovered by humanity, but they're there and the universe operates by them. Something really that I don't know whether we can ever actually understand what it was. We can give it at the end, perhaps we can't necessarily understand what it was. But it seems to be irrational for somebody to say that God did not create the universe, that the laws of physics did. Who the hell created the laws of physics? So it's a chicken and egg thing. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Who created the egg?
The egg, the chicken involved.
Well, I'll come on to different
right
I agree with Mike's logic. I'll agree with Mike's logic. When I was still in the Navy, the last job I did was captain of one of the offshore detection vessels. And when you're captain, you also, well, basically it's a choice these days, but on a Sunday, it's your job to run a church service. And that really made me think, because are you going to do it as a hypocrite, or are you going to do it because you believe in it? And I had a think about it, and I'd been at 3 weddings and a funeral, so 3 funerals and a wedding person really to become the church. And I had to think about it, and I decided that I'd do it, because I felt I wanted to do it. So that was just me beginning to think a little bit. If I jump forwards, at one stage my life's normal, and the next minute it's an absolute nightmare. I'm being threatened with death threats, all sorts of stuff going on, because I challenged this organisation, Common Purpose. And then one day, what I'll call strange stuff, coincidences start to happen. The phone rings and somebody says, I've got information for you. And they give me a little package of information, and I'm thinking, why are you telling me that? And put the phone down, and then the other phone goes. The other phone goes, the other phone goes. You take 10 phone calls, one after another. And you say, what's going on? And I didn't know what was going on. But people were giving me information, and then I started on a little journey where I'm discovering more and more stuff. Things happen. One day there's a knock on the door, and there's a guy called Ernie, very big guy, and he's carrying an overhead projector, you know, one of the old foil acetate things. I said, no, what are you doing? He said, well, I brought this for you. And I said, well, why are you giving that to me? And he said, well, I think you're going to be doing some talks. So I said, well, that's interesting. I was thinking about that. He said, well, there you are. So I took it. I said, do you want to come in for a cup of tea? And he said, no, I'll go and get the screen. So the screen came in, and about 2 weeks later, I did the first talk. And then I'll jump it through a bit. People coming to me for my help. A lady brought to me, very depressed, anxious, paranoid. She'd been involved with Common Purpose. And she's brought to me. Why? You know about Common Purpose. Well, I didn't know much at all. But I was able to help her. And then we ended up where we decided we've got to do something. I got involved with UKIP at one stage until I realised that was all part of the political pantomime. And then we broke away with these 3 good ladies here, and we said we need an office, and somebody covered the cost on a very small room. And we moved into the office, and we didn't have anything apart from a desk and a chair. And then all of a sudden, somebody said, oh, I've got a computer. And then somebody kindly gave us a photocopier. And then somebody gave us another computer. And then we were set up, and then the phone started ringing. So a whole series of things happened. And what I've discovered is, usually when you talk to the other people who are doing this, out on the talking circuit, they will say, weird stuff was happening. Mike said it. Now, he hasn't gone down what we call a Christian route, but he's recognising that coincidences are something more than that. Yeah? So in my opinion, something's trying to shake us, saying, wake up. And some of us have experienced things quite strongly. Other people are starting to wake up. Sometimes at a talk, somebody will say, do you think there's more to this than men in politics? And I say, absolutely, because we are fighting pure evil. Yeah. And then you can come back to the chicken and egg, and you say, well, does evil exist? Look at the world. Yeah? Look at what is actually being done to people and kids' sons at work out there. And I'll tell you, evil does exist, and the Satanists know it, and that's why they do their rituals. And we're pretty confident about this because we've got some good people with us who've come out of that movement. And I saw was present at a very interesting discussion between the an ex-Satanist and a very devout Christian. And the Satanist said to the Christian, the trouble with you lot is you don't know what ritual is. So he went a bit quiet and he said, what I'm talking about is when you've got the altar and the candles and you go through the ceremony, you've no idea what you're doing. And it was very, very quiet then. And he said, I'll tell you what's going on. What's going on is the satanic vicar is packaging up all the free energy. And then he's using it. And I saw the Christian gentleman getting very, very wobbly because all of a sudden he was into an area he didn't want to go to. When I did a talk in a Baptist church many years, well, 4 years ago in Cornwall, afterwards, a huge bloke, a farm sort of guy, came up to me and he said, what you said is incredible and it's spiritual, absolutely. He said, it's all going on around here, the witchcraft. Yeah, it's going on, it's real.
Nutters.
Pardon?
Nutters.
Well, I'm always wary of using that sort of description because that makes it casual. They're idiots, they're nutters.
But so you're telling me evil exists?
Pardon?
You're saying that evil exists outside of someone's actions and thoughts?
I believe so, yeah. Other people would not agree with that, and I wouldn't get too fussed about it. But if you say to me, what are we fighting? We are fighting evil. And it manifests in different ways. I've never spoken about this on camera before, so we've moved on somewhere. Yeah.
Let's say with, on the dollar bill where you've got the pyramid with the seven top,
Yeah.
and George Bush Senior, as they were bombing Iraq, he said, bring in the 1,000 points of light, which is Masonic. You also see the pyramid with the eye on loads of churches in Upland Cathedral. You see it on confessional boxes, the religion bit, or the rigmarole. Have you got any comment on that sort of thing, where these things, on old cathedrals?
Well, I don't have any doubt that the
that stuff.
Masonic movement,
Yeah.
the top of the Masonic movement is satanic.
Yeah.
Under
Yeah, I think so.
Tribulon or Baal.
Yeah, I would
And
agree.
it's effectively Baal worship.
Yeah, that's
I believe that the majority of Masons are dupes, so they really don't know what they're involved with.
Yeah.
But for me, Freemasonry is satanic, there's no
Yeah.
doubt about that. We know that Freemasonry and Common Purpose seem pretty closely interfaced, but we're still working on that bit at the moment. And we do get Freemasons talk to us occasionally. In London, two guys came to talk to me. One was a policeman, a serving policeman, but in plain clothes off duty, and he said that they were Freemasons, but they'd stayed in the movement because they were discovering what it was really about. And I said, that's a dangerous game, and he said, I know, but we wanted to do it. And the other thing the guy told me was that he worked on a child abuse case, child trafficking, child abuse, child prostitution up in London. He said they got it, the whole thing sewn up, people with very high positions of power involved, judges, MPs. Report went into the boss, and he said 3 weeks later he called us into his office and said, I'm sorry guys, we've been told to drop it. Yeah.
I saw David Icke give a talk about 10 years ago, and he ended the speech saying, beware the microchip.
Yeah.
He said, if I could leave you with one thing today, it's beware the microchip. Well, it's pretty much taken over the world, but...
Not where they're going, because you presumably haven't got one in you yet.
Well, I've got one in me, but, you know, my house, my computer, my phone...
There's an excellent guy...
It hasn't progressed. If they've got all this power, it hasn't seemed to have progressed very quickly.
Greg, can you pronounce that for me? Greg Nicoletis, right, from Australia. One of Ian Crane's things, he did a 3-hour talk on technology and where they're taking it. And his whole talk was based on promotional videos by the firms themselves. So the firm told you where they were going. And it was phenomenal. They were talking effectively about not only chipping everybody, but anything you touched would be chipped. So anything you used, a cloth, liquid, they would actually, with nanotechnology, have the full details of where it was produced and everything else. and they are already assembling the database to control this lot. And of course, the thing with a grain of rice-sized chip is you only need whatever it is, a millionth of a gram of ricin, one of the original sort of chemical or biological warfare liquids, and you're dead when somebody presses a remote button. We were talking in the car coming up about where they're going at the moment with creation of human flesh in the laboratory. So they've already created the ear on the back of a mouse. And I actually believe they are welcoming the casualties coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. It's not the dead that is the real issue. They only talk about the number of dead bodies. For every dead person in a military conflict zone, depending on the intensity of the fighting, there will be between 4, 5, 6 injured. And I believe they're using all the blokes who are missing limbs in order to test their high-tech prosthetic limbs. So I believe that they want soldiers injured out there so that they can do the high-tech medical stuff for them.
Cloning technology.
Yeah. And cloning, if they're talking about cloning human beings, they've already done it. Now, I know we're getting on here, but I'm just going to stick up for Ike a bit. I can't remember which of the books I read of his, but it was going back a few years. But somebody said, have you ever read any Ike? And I said, who's he? And they said, well, he's this ex-BBC guy, Green Party. Some people have a problem with the business. But have a read of the book. He's my dentist, actually. And I'm reading through, I think chapter 3 was talking about paedophilia, Devon and Cornwall Police. And I'm reading it and I'm thinking, well, I know this is going on. So I read the rest of the book. And all I can say is that I think he suffered from the age-old problem of being ahead of his time. I don't agree with all of it, but if you say to me, what are we fighting? We are fighting with people who are as ruthless as Lenin or Stalin or the Nazi regime. And something which is well documented in this book here that I showed you somewhere. I knew I brought it for a reason. This is one of the books that talks about the use of the occult in the setting up of the SS. So if you go through their insignia, where did the death's head and all that came from? It came from the Theosophical Society. And the home of the Theosophical...
No, actually it's a perversion of the Theosophical tenets. You know, they took the ideas of theosophy and perverted them. Turn them on their head. You know.
Okay, I have trouble.
There's two sides to all the symbology and all the insignias and that of occult science. They have a white and a black side. You know, the plural duality. Yeah, satanic side of it turns it and reverses it and takes it and uses it.
Okay, I can accept that, so I generalise.
The whole Aryan thing was a misunderstanding or an intentional misunderstanding of these tenets of age-old philosophies, you know, which in their instance were good things about, you know, enlightenment of individuals and our own finding our own. That's what all this is a war on consciousness. It's a war on our own individual ability to have our relationship with higher aspects of ourselves, you know, whatever that might mean to anyone. But like, you know, and that's what they don't want us to do. That's the whole war on drugs and stuff, and all the thing that's going on at the moment with legal highs and all that lot. Because lumped in with that is all the kind of possible sacred plants that could give us access to the kind of information that they don't want us to have.
Absolutely, yeah. I agree with you. I agree with you.
Can I just say, in Germany, they've already put those chips into the teenagers. Teenagers now do not carry a bag or a purse or a wallet. everywhere they go, they just scan their hand. The paper into a club or the paper a drink, they just scan their hand.
It's happening here. It's happening here.
A dozen German teenagers in the last 3 months, and none of them have mentioned that to me.
Well, it is happening over there.
We've
And the
also got
teenagers-
I've worked with German teenagers in the last 3 months, and none of them have mentioned that.
Well, maybe they're,
In certain places, it's
you know, say
definitely
maybe they're not in the areas where they've started it, but they have started it.
That's happening here all the time.
I think it's wonderful.
It's happening in
They've got to
schools
carry it
here.
back.
Yeah, that's
I'll just
awful.
jump in from a different direction. One of the things that Common Purpose does with the graduates is introduces these concepts for them to debate. So I've got documentation where I can show Common Purpose introducing the debate, are microchips useful? Should people be chipped? So what they're doing, this is one of the reasons that Common Purpose is so dangerous, is they are slipping into people's minds where they want things to go. And they do it by messing around with the group psychology. I can't give you it all tonight, but if you haven't looked at it before, go and look at neuro-linguistic programming on the internet. And the gentleman at the back can say the same thing, because I agree with it. You can use NLP for healing people, that can be done. But we are talking about the bad people out there who use it as an offensive weapon. Common Purpose, you don't see it, and you have these trained people. If you go on the CP Exposed, you can go into the database, you can see where these people are implementing their psychology over the wider group of people. In Sheffield, Common Purpose, as one example, there's going to be a lot of stuff coming out about this shortly. Common Purpose controls the city. Yeah, you may think it's the councillors, the officers, it's not, it's the Common Purpose trained people. And this is where it's so dangerous. Can I just jump back to the Nazis? Something which came out in the local Devon paper about 5 years ago was some of the original German invasion plans. And it showed detailed maps of where Uncle Hitler was going to have his headquarters. Anybody know? Bridge North. Why would you go and have your headquarters in Bridge North? Bridge North is on the Welsh borders, up from Shrewsbury. Now, if you do your research, you'll find that that is one of the key areas for work by the Theosophical Society of Golden Dawn. All right? I could talk a bit more on this subject because it's quite interesting. I never knew anything about it. There's tons of documentation about the Nazis using the wrong side of occult stuff as well. We talk about high knowledge, they're using the wrong side of it.
Yeah, that's what they're looking at. The esoteric side now is really looking towards the Soviets, so they're going to close down.
Yeah, my mind says that if you start to, I don't believe in channeling. I have a beer with somebody afterwards talking about it. Pardon? Well, channeling is going to a higher, as far as I understand it, it's going to a higher level of consciousness so that you are starting to communicate with higher beings. So it's not seen in the same way that somebody would say they're praying, but by meditating or whatever, you're opening up a channel or you're taking yourself somewhere. And I would say what's interesting is that they're using the stuff like creative visualization with children, which is a form of channeling. And what I personally believe is that if you get involved in this and you're opening a channel, you don't know what's going to come down the channel.
Right.
Yeah. But this is for another topic, maybe. Anyway, yes. Psychic warrior. Yeah. Yeah, I know one who's done the course, and I challenged him to do some work for me on a particular subject. What he came back with was, I'm not going to say it was 90% correct, but when I looked at it, he was bracket and what I was made around. And he paid to do that course at his own pocket. Because there were a couple of the original American team who decided they could make the buck by just saying anybody could have a go at doing it. It's quite fascinating.
They were selecting students.
Yeah.
Is that being not good?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking at that.
Okay, I'm going to end there. Thanks very much. Just keep at it, because it's coming. It's going to be really spectacular what happens, but you're not allowed to sit on your bottoms. If you've got any friends who are into the old church business, I'm here and I'm looking at nice images and cuddling my neighbour. That isn't what it's about. It's about actually getting out there and fighting. You are going to lose some friends.
What about using this lawful rebellion path to claim your freedom? Is that putting yourself up there to get, is that being a nail that gets hit if you go down that path? Yeah, so the cops know who you are, the council, they all know who you are as soon as you are. I've claimed all my rights and no discipline.
We've helped set up the lawful rebellion thing. There's sort of different versions of it.
There's different.
I'm going to come back to John Harris. One of John Harris's talks, somebody said this to him, and he said, look, I'm able to go and challenge the authority, and if we're not bound up, it wouldn't be a big problem for me. You have to decide what you can do, what your limits are. And last night I was talking to two guys, and one of them has been caught now, this is county court, high court level, where he's been saying basically this court is fraudulent. And they turned around and said to him, more or less, we're going to do you for contempt of court. And he said, well, of course, you know you can't.
Yeah.
And quoted, and the next minute, judges disappear out of the court.
Yeah.
But you've got to be prepared to take the risk, or they're going to bang you up.
It's getting good information.
But my logic is very simple. At the moment, the power isn't in force because we're all still here. We wait much longer, we won't be having meetings like this.
Yeah.
So you've got to get out there and fight. But if you've got a family dependent on you, you don't want to get yourself banged up.
That's a problem for a lot of
You
people.
want to take it as far as you can. Yeah, but it's trial and error. But the other thing we know, and we don't get any problem. Why, I don't know, but after the initial nasty stuff, we used to come into the office in the morning expecting to open the door and get trapped. It never happened. We only had one visit from the police who tried to say that one of the articles we produced was anti-Semitic. And I said to them, have you read the article? And it was two lady policemen. And said, no, we haven't. And I said, well, how are you coming here to lecture and you haven't read it? Because if you had read it, you realised that it was actually pro-Jewish, because it was actually saying that the Zionist regime was an oppressive regime. It wasn't criticising Jewish people. And we had a little debate, and then we got on to fraud and corruption with Plymouth Police, and they left in a hurry. So I think we can do a lot, but what we don't agree with is we don't believe that lawful, well, one, you've got to be peaceful. Because if we get involved in violence, you just head down the same line. And that's when it's been, I'll just give you this one because it works quite well. BNP audience. And I don't have a problem with BNP audiences. I find them fine. I find them absolutely fine. I'm with a BNP audience, and I put up a picture of the mosque, and I said I'll come back to that, and I didn't. So eventually, the guy shouts out from the back, "You haven't talked about the mosque." And I said, "Oh, does that upset you, the mosque?" And he said, "Yeah, too bloody right, all these people coming in." And I said, "Yeah, it's a bit of a problem. I don't like the mosques either." I said, "How did they get here? Did they fight their way ashore?" And he said, "No. We get here. Well, we let them in." So I said to him, "Oh, you let them in. You let them in." So I bloody well didn't let them in. I said, "Who did?" And he said, "Well, it was the," and then somebody shouted out, "Well, it was the politicians." So I said, who's your enemy? The people who were invited in or the politicians who let them in? And it all went very quiet. And I can tell you that there are B&B people out there and they have meetings like this. And I'll say to all the ones I go to, if we fight, we lose. Because that's what the other side wants. And if we mix with the Muslims and we do talks and people come up to us and they're talking the same language. In fact, I would say that a lot of the Muslims seem to have a better grip on it than we do because their network is looking at the bankers through the Middle Eastern eye. So they are very well aware of who the bankers are. So they see the Zionist connection, which is probably not a big hit now. They see the Zionist connection because they're interested in that connection, whereas we're blinded. We've had several people who were supporters, and then when we wrote an article about, well, it was the Israel's hammering the Palestinians, where they were using phosphor bombs. And we wrote an article, it was pretty gentle, and I got a phone call from a guy who said, oh, I can't support you anymore because you're attacking Israel, and I'm a Bible believer. So I had a discussion with him and decided he didn't really know much about the Bible. But, you know, we mustn't fight. I'd rather have all of the immigrants with us. Let's get the problem sorted out, and then you can say what happens then. Yeah, but at the moment, it doesn't matter to me if I'm going to be in a trench fighting the people causing the problem. If the guy next to me is a Russian, I'd be quite happy. I'd probably be very happy if she's a Russian woman, because that's pretty effective.
Brian, may I ask, are you in Lawful Rebellion as, like, John Harris sent off an affidavit to the Queen, or do you pay your tax on your car? Have you gone down that line, or...?
I'm really, really embarrassed to say that
I just thought I'd ask,
up till now, I haven't gone down that line. And the reason is, it's a personal one. If I look back over the last 10 years, I think I've caused enough grief for my family. Because I do this full time. I stick up for my wife, she's put up the hell of a lot. Initially she didn't understand it, now she does. But I feel I've made a contribution. If, as this guy's just said, if you then go down that route, that is another risk. And I'm feeling, do I need that? However, I am so incensed about the monk coming over on BBC, I have decided that I'm no longer going to pay my TV licence. And I'm thinking of having to go on council tax as well. But you can criticise me if you like, I just feel that I've taken a front end of the wedge on one subject. I've taken a bit of a hammering over the years for doing this, but I've stuck with it. There are plenty more people who can go down these other things. And this is where we know the system's working, because Roger Hayes, who's chairman of the British Constitution Group, has been brilliant over the last 5 months. I think he's been in court about 5 times.
Was that the guy that was in Stoke-on-Trent?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching that.
And he's been doing it. He's been challenging the courts and the magistrates, and he's bringing the thing to a halt. They don't know what to say to him. And he's not paying any tax, he's not paying any council tax, he's not paying his water.
Yeah, each man's got his own path, I respect that. I just thought I'd ask you, I'm not criticising.
No, well,
I threw the DVLA in the Stockholm today for the van.
Yeah.
But they just don't want to talk to me at the moment for some reason. No advice at all.
Well, this is great, and the other thing we know is every time they're challenging in court, clerk of the court afterwards says, very interested in what you're talking about. Or the magistrate, you've seen them, they're thinking, what's going on about?
We've seen a few walkouts on YouTube and that with the layman advisor and stuff.
What do they do when they go and have coffee?
Yeah, they're banned.
They talk to their mates. I've got to be a little bit careful here. The same in a recent court case, a very interesting barrister appeared, who was very good, and said to me, some of us are very worried about what's going on. He said, we've seen stuff in the court happening which shouldn't happen. There's another barrister who gives me information. And when he invited me up to London, took me all around the Temple Library and everything, it was great. And when I said to him, come on then, why why have you got interested? He said, well, I saw some of your stuff, and then I was in court one day. The judge was breaking the law. So I gently tried to bring the judge back onto the straight and narrow. And the judge said to me, Mr. X, if you continue down this path, I will put you in prison. So he said, I'm a barrister in court, the judge is breaking the law and he's threatening to put me in prison. But the other barrister said to me, Brian, we've got a bit of a problem at the moment. And I said, what is it? And he said, half of it's Masonic, and the big problem is Jewish Masonic. But he doesn't mean Jews, he means false Jews. Keep doing this because it's very important. Yeah? So these people are coming out of the woodwork. And the police, I got home one night at midnight and there was a police car parked and he followed me into the car park and asked me where I come from, and I thought, this is the have I been drinking, which I had. Asked me my name and I thought, right, what am I going to do here?
Commonly known as Brian.
Well, I went down the middle, I just said I'm Brian, and he didn't say, what's your surname? So I just didn't, I'm Brian. And he then asked me some questions, and then there was a pause, and I said, can I ask you a question? And he said, yeah. And I said, do you know that the Association of Chief Police Officers is a private company? And this is his answer, fascinating. He said, have they done that already? And I said, yes, they have. And I said, do you know this? And do you know that? And he said, are you ex-police? And I said, no, I'm ex-Navy. He said, how do you know all this stuff? And I said, because we've got a problem. Let me give you some of these. And he said, I'll tell you one thing, I've got 3 years to do. And he said, when the time comes up, I'm out. And I said, can I tell you something? And he said, okay. And I said, don't, because we need people like you in the police to sort it out. Now, that guy was driving a Volvo motorway, one of the top 200-mile-an-hour cars. Never ever seen one of those on my road. They're always Ford Focus things. And he was on his own. What was he doing? And I went indoors thinking, did that guy come to see me? Don't know. It's really weird, but we're getting calls from people in hospitals, doctors, pharmacists. We're murdering people. People talking about body parts. And Jill Dando, in my opinion, almost certainly murdered because she was investigating the baby body parts. So these whistleblowers are coming out of the system. They're gold dust. So don't be rude to all BBC people, because in the BBC are people who are worried. Every time I meet somebody in the media, I say to them, you should be worried, and they say, why? And I say, because something nasty's coming, and they always murder the leaders and the journalists first. They say, ha, ha, ha. I said, do research on how many are dead in Russia. Yeah? Enjoy yourself by frightening the pants off people. That's it, I'm going to shut up.
And there we go, Brian Gerrish. I hope you enjoyed this and got something out of the recording. In a future episode I will be uploading the Q&A session that came immediately after this presentation, and also a speech by Mike Robinson regarding the truth behind the financial state of the world. You've been listening to the Information Podcast. Stay tuned.